The small ship broke through the black sky, a lonely shadow moving among the stars. Inside the ship sat a human traveler, his face tired, his hands steady on the controls. He was searching for fuel. For food, maybe for answers, but mostly he was searching for survival. The galaxy was wide, and it was cruel. And a man alone had to be harder than steel. The scanners caught something, a broken colony on a ruined world. The planet looked sick. Its skies filled with smoke, its surface cracked with old fire. Once it must have been alive with cities and farms. But now only ruins remained. The human slowed his ship, his eyes narrowing. Sometimes ruins meant danger, but sometimes ruins meant hope. He landed anyway, because he had no choice. The air was bitter when he stepped out. Ash drifted like snow. Buildings leaned and crumbled. He moved with quiet steps. His hand near the weapon at his belt. There was no sound. Only the whisper of the wind across stone. Then he heard a Ta voice, weak, trembling. Not in his language, but trying. Human, it said. Broken, but clear. Human, please. He turned fast, weapon raised, his eyes sharp. From behind a shattered wall came a figure. It was not human, its skin pale and smooth. Its eyes larger than his, glowing faintly. It was thin, too thin. Bones showing under its strange skin behind it. Two smaller shapes clung to its legs. Children, the traveler froze, his weapon steady, but his mind racing. The figure raised its hands, empty, shaking, and then it spoke again, words heavy with fear and hope. My children are well behaved, the alien woman said. Her voice cracked, her head lowered. I can be a good wife to you, human. The words struck him harder than any weapon. For a moment, he thought he had heard wrong. He looked at her, at the children hiding behind her legs, at the way her eyes begged. And he felt something cold move in his chest. The galaxy was wide. And humans were not loved. Most saw them as weak, primitive, too stubborn to bow, but too small to rule. So why would an alien, here in the dust and ash, beg to belong to a human? It made no sense, and yet her eyes said it was no trick. Her eyes said this was the last thread of hope she held. The human lowered his weapon slightly, not out of trust, but out of confusion. Why? He asked, his voice low, careful. The alien woman took a breath, her thin shoulders shaking. Because you are human, she said, and humans do not break. Her words sent a chill through him. He had heard humans cursed, mocked, hunted, but never honored. Yet here was a widow in a place of death, offering her life, offering her children. Not for love, not for greed, but because she believed in the strength of a man she did not know. The children peeked out from behind her legs, their eyes wide, their stomachs empty. They were silent, too disciplined for their age. As if they had learned quickly that noise could bring danger, the traveler's heart twisted. Though his face stayed hard, he had seen children on battlefields before, and he had seen them fall. He hated that he could see the same fear here, the same hopelessness. Still, his mind worked like iron gears. It could be a trap. The widow could be bait. The children could be lies, but no trickster would use words like that. No hunter would beg to be a wife, to have her children spared. This was something else, something deeper. And it was dangerous. The human stepped closer, slow, his eyes sharp. The widow did not move, did not run, only lowered her head further. Her children clung to her, their small fingers tight on her legs. My husband is gone, she whispered. Our home is gone. Everything is gone, but you are human. And if anyone can save us, it is you. Her voice cracked on the last word, but her eyes held steady. She was desperate, but not broken. She had chosen her plea carefully, as if she had thought of it for a long time, as if she had waited for a human, any human, to come. And now that one stood before her, she would risk everything on him. The traveler felt the weight of her words press down on him. He wanted to turn away, to climb back into his ship and vanish. He had his own battles, his own wounds, his own hunger. But he also knew this moment was different. He could feel it in his bones, something about this plea. About this widow, about her children. It was the beginning of something larger than himself. He stood in the ruins, ash drifting between them. One human, one widow, two children, and a question that hung heavy in the broken air. Would he walk away, or would he stay? Would he fight for strangers? Or would he let them be taken by the darkness? The human did not answer yet, but the widow's plea echoed inside him, and it would not leave. The human did not move for a long moment. The widow's words echoed in his mind. Strange and heavy, her eyes were wet but strong, her children's silent shadows behind her. The wind carried ash between them, whispering across the ruined stones. At last, he spoke, his voice sharp, controlled. "Tell me," he said, "what happened here?" The widow lowered her head, as if her memories were heavier than her body. She sank to her knees. Her children pressing close, her voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "This was our world," she said, "our home, our life." She pointed toward the broken towers around them. Once tall, now nothing but leaning skeletons of stone. "And steel, we built cities," she said. "We sang songs, we raised families." Her lips shook. But she continued. "Then they came the raiders, the hunters, the ones who feed on weakness." The human's jaw tightened. He had heard of such raiders before. Mercenaries with no flag, no law. They burned planets. They sold survivors. They thrived on pain. He had fought them once, long ago, and he still carried their scars. The widow's voice grew sharper. "They wanted our labor, our young, our future. My husband fought them. He fought until his blood covered the stones." Her hand pressed to her chest, as if the wound was still fresh. "They took the strong, they killed the defiant. And when the fires ended, I was left with only my children." Her words cracked like broken glass. The human studied her, the hollows in her cheeks. The fire still faint in her eyes. She had lost everything, yet she stood, begging. Not for herself, but for her children. It stirred something in him, something he had buried long ago. "Why ask me?" he muttered, almost to himself. "Because you are human," she whispered, "and humans do not kneel." The human's eyes narrowed. It was not the first time he had heard that belief whispered across the stars. Some races mocked humans, called them reckless, stubborn, fragile, but there were always stories. Tales of humans who fought when no one else would. Tales of humans who endured what others could not. To some, humans were foolish. To others, they were terrifying. The widow reached out, her hand trembling but steady. "I watched my people bend, break, beg," she said. "I watched them sell themselves for food, for safety, for lies." Her eyes hardened. "But I have heard stories of humans. Stories of worlds where you stood against empires, where you fought even when you had no chance." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I would rather my children follow a human into death than live as slaves to raiders." The human felt. A shiver crawled down his spine. Her faith was not born from love or friendship, but from belief. Belief that humanity was something unbroken, something fierce. And in this ruined place, her belief was like a weapon sharper than his blade. He crouched, his eyes level with hers. "You would bind yourself to me without knowing my name, without knowing my heart?" he asked. The widow nodded, her eyes steady now. "Yes," she said. "Because you are human." The human looked at her children. Their eyes were wide, their stomachs thin, their hands clutched at her dress. They were too quiet, too disciplined for their age. They had already learned the rules of survival. Silence, obedience, patience. His chest ached at the sight. He had seen soldiers look less broken. "Your world is gone," he said. "What will you do if I walk away?" The widow bowed her head, her hair falling like a curtain. "Then we will die." She said simply, "But I will not beg another, only you." The human felt the weight of her words like chains around his chest. He had carried many burdens, but this was different. This was not duty, not war, not orders. This was choice, and choice was heavier than war. His hand brushed the stone floor, black with old fire. He could almost see the past children laughing, families eating, men and women building. And then the fire, the screams, the smoke. It could have been his world, his people, his home. It could have been Earth. The widow raised her head, her eyes bright with desperate courage. "You ask why I choose you," she said. "It is because you are human, and when you stand, others will follow." Her children, pressed close, their eyes shining with a fragile hope. Hope so thin it could break with one wrong word. Hope that rested on his shoulders. The human stood slowly, the ash crunching under his boots. He looked at the broken world around him. He looked at the widow, her children, her trembling hands. And he felt the old fire stir inside him, the fire of his people, the fire of being human. He did not answer her yet, but when his eyes met hers, she saw something she had prayed for. Not love, not pity, but resolve. The kind of resolve that could change the ruins of a world. The wind howled, carrying the scent of smoke and rust. Far away, in the shadows of the broken city, something moved. The widow's ears twitched. Her body tensed. She whispered, "They will come back." Her voice shook. The raiders never leave a world until they have taken everything. The human's hand moved to his weapon. He did not smile. He did not speak, but inside, a fire. Burned, he was human, and soon the raiders would learn what that meant. The night fell heavy on the broken colony. The ruined towers became black teeth biting at the sky. The human sat near the fire he had built from old wood and shattered beams. The flame was small, just enough for light, just enough for warmth. Across from him, the widow sat with her children. Their thin bodies pressed close together. The orange glow flickered on her pale skin. On the wide eyes of her little ones, the human said nothing. But inside his mind, a storm was rising. He had survived wars, betrayals, Akasa, long nights alone on empty worlds. He had lived by rules carved in blood. Trust no one. Carry only what you need. Fight only when you must. These rules had kept him alive when others died. But tonight, those rules were cracking, because across the fire sat a widow who had offered herself and her children to him. Not for love, not for comfort, but for survival, and her words still echoed like iron in his head. "Because you are human, and humans do not break." He clenched his jaw. Staring into the flames, her people had broken, she said, bent under the raiders until there was nothing left. But she believed humans were different, different enough that she would tie her fate, and her children's fate, to a man she did not know. It was madness, and yet it stirred something inside him. His hand brushed the old scar on his neck, a memory of another battle, another choice. He remembered the faces of men and women who had followed him. He remembered how many of them had died. He told himself long ago that he would never carry such weight again. Never again would he be responsible for lives that were not his own. And yet here, in the ruins of a world not his, 3 lives were already pulling at his soul. The widow watched him, silent, her children already asleep at her side. Her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight, not pleading now, just waiting. She had made her choice. She had placed her hope in him. Now she waited to see if he would accept it or walk away. The human stood, his boots grinding against the stone. He paced to the edge of the firelight, staring into the shadows. He knew the raiders would return. He had seen the signs in the ruins. Scorched tracks, broken doors, the silence. Of fear when raiders claimed a world. They always came back until the bones of the people and the planet were theirs. He could leave now before they returned, fly away into the dark sky. It was the safer choice, the logical choice. But could he leave them behind? His chest tightened. He remembered his own childhood, stories his father told him, stories of Earth. Of a time when humans stood against greater powers, when they fought not for glory. But because they refused to bow, that same fire lived in him, though he had buried it beneath scars and silence. Now this widow had dug it up again. With nothing but desperate words, he turned back. His eyes locked on her. "You don't know me," he said sharply. "You don't know what I've done." The widow shook her head slowly, her voice calm. "I know enough," she said. "You are human, and that is all I need to know." Her faith unsettled him more than her fear ever could. Faith was dangerous. Faith could burn. Faith could demand more than a man could give. And yet, he could not deny the weight it carried. It pressed against him heavier than his weapon. Heavier than his armor, the human sat again, his voice low, almost a growl. "If I help you, if I protect you, it will bring the raiders." The widow met his gaze without flinching. "They will come anyway," she whispered. "With you, we have a chance. Without you, we have none." Her children stirred in their sleep, their small hands clutching at the edges of her torn dress. He stared at them, and his heart twisted again. He told himself he did not care. He told himself he was a soldier, not a savior. But the truth whispered inside him he could not watch them die. Not when he could fight. Not when he could be human. The night deepened, the fire crackled, and the human's mind battled itself. One side screamed for caution, for survival, for leaving before dawn. The other side burned with the widow's words. With the sight of her children, with the weight of his own humanity, the dilemma tore at him. Harder than any blade. He wanted freedom, but freedom meant leaving them. He wanted survival. But survival meant becoming the kind of man he despised, the kind who turned away from the weak. At last, he let out a long breath, his eyes hard as iron. He would not promise yet. He would not speak foolish vows. But his silence, his steady gaze, his hand resting on his weapon told the widow what she needed to know. She nodded once, slow, as if she understood the decision forming inside him. The fire reflected in her eyes, and for the first time since he had met her, she allowed herself a small, fragile smile. The human turned back to the shadows beyond the fire. He could almost feel the raiders moving in the distance, like wolves. Circling in the dark, they would come soon. He knew it. When they did, he would face a choice no longer. He would fight. Because that was what humans did, and deep in the ruins, where the wind carried whispers, the night seemed to breathe with quiet suspense. The human sat, torn between leaving and staying. But already he knew his dilemma was no longer about survival. It was about what it meant to be human. The night was quiet. Too quiet. The human sat awake while the widow and her children slept near the fading fire. His eyes scanned the ruins. Sharp, steady, never resting. He had seen enough war to know silence was not safety. Silence was warning. The air shifted, carrying a faint vibration. The human stiffened, his hand moving to his weapon. He knew that sound of growl of vengeance, low and hungry. Raiders were coming. He rose to his feet, boots grinding softly against stone. The widow stirred, her eyes opening in fear. "They are here," she whispered. Pulling her children close, the human gave a single nod. His face hard, his body calm. He had been waiting for this. The glow of firelight stretched across the ruins as shadows moved at the edges. Figures crept closer, armored, armed, their voices sharp and cruel. The raiders laughed quietly as they saw the flicker of fire. They thought it would be easy, just another hunt. But tonight, the human was waiting. He motioned with his hand. Telling the widow to keep low, she obeyed, pressing her children against the wall. Shielding them with her body, the human moved forward, stepping into the darkness, away from the fire. He became a shadow among shadows, silent as a ghost. The first raider stepped into the open, his weapon raised. He sneered when he saw the small camp, the widow trembling, the children clutching her. "Pathetic," he hissed. "Easy prey." But then a shape moved behind him, fast, precise. The human struck. His blade flashed, swift and silent. The raider fell without a sound, his body collapsing into the dust. The others did not notice at first, too eager for their prize. The human melted back into the ruins, his breath steady, his eyes cold. Another raider crept forward, his weapon aimed at the widow before he could fire. A rock clattered across the stone. He turned his head, confused, and in that instant, the human strike came again. Quick, sharp, final. The raider dropped, his weapon slipping from lifeless fingers. The rest noticed. Their laughter died, replaced by curses and shouts. "Someone's here," one growled. "Find him." They spread out, weapons raised, their eyes scanning the ruins. But the ruins were his ally. The dark was his shield. The human moved like a hunter, not like prey. He struck from shadows, never in the same place twice. A knife here, a kick there, a raider falling into silence. Before his friends could react, fear began to spread through them. This was not the hunt they expected. This was war. The widow watched from the firelight, her heart racing, her children clung to her, their eyes wide. They had seen the raiders kill. They had seen them break strong men. But this human fought different. He did not fight with numbers. He did not fight with fear. He fought with cunning, with will, with fire that would not bend. The raiders grew desperate, firing wildly into the dark. Sparks burst against stone. Echoes roared through the ruins. But the human stayed calm, patient. He waited for their mistakes, and then he struck, one by one. The hunters became the hunted. At last, the leader shouted, his voice shaking with anger. "Fall back," he growled. "We'll come with more." The raiders dragged their wounded, retreating into the night, their laughter gone, replaced by silence and fear. The engines roared again, carrying them away. But the human knew they would return. Raiders never gave up their prey so easily. He stepped back into the firelight, his blade dark with blood. His chest rose and fell. With steady breath, his eyes sharp, the widow stared at him, awe and fear mixing in her gaze. She had seen many fight, but never like this. Never with such cold focus, never with such stubborn strength. Her children peeked from behind her. There, small mouths open, they had been ready for death, but instead they saw something else. Hope. The human cleaned his blade, sliding it back into its sheath. "They'll be back," he said, his voice low, steady. The widow nodded, her face pale, but her eyes burning. "Yes," she whispered, "but now they will fear you." He did not answer, his mind already calculating. He knew the raiders would return in greater numbers. He knew this was only the beginning, but tonight he had shown them something. Humans did not run, humans did not kneel, and when a human fought, the night itself seemed to shift. The widow touched his arm lightly, her voice soft. "You are different," she whispered. "You are what I prayed for." The human said nothing, but inside, a fire burned hotter. He had tried to be alone, to carry only his own burdens, but now the widow and her children were tied to him, and so was this fight. The ruins were quiet again. The fire crackled, but the human knew the quiet would not last. The raiders would return, stronger, angrier, and when they did, the galaxy would see the first sparks of something it had long forgotten, the strength of humanity. The fire burned low, its glow fading into the ruins. The human sat in silence, sharpening his blade. His eyes fixed on the shadows. The widow watched him, her children sleeping beside her. Their breathing soft, fragile. The night was calm now, but not safe, never safe. She could not stop staring at him. The way he moved, the way he fought, the way he stood tall, even when the raiders had outnumbered him. He was not like her people. He was not like any she had ever seen, and though she had already begged him for help, already tied her fate to him, there was still more she had not said, more she had hidden. The human looked up, his sharp gaze cutting. Through her silence, "You are keeping something from me," he said, his voice low, calm. The widow flinched, her eyes dropping. For a moment, she said nothing, her lips pressed tight. Then she drew a long breath, steadying herself. "Yes," she whispered, "there is something you must know." He studied her carefully, weighting the widow's hands, trembled as she stroked her children's hair, as if drawing strength from their small warmth. "My people," she began, "we were once proud. We built cities that touched the clouds, ships that danced between stars." Her eyes darkened, but pride does not stop fire, and it does not stop fear. She swallowed hard, her voice turning sharp. "When the raiders came, we bent, we gave in. We believed if we bowed low enough, we would be spared." Her eyes lifted, meeting his. "We were wrong." The human said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He had seen it before, worlds breaking, not from force, but from surrender. The widow's voice lowered, soft and filled with something deeper than sorrow. "But there are old words, old stories, older than the raiders, older even than my people's fall." Her gaze sharpened. "They speak of humans." The human froze, his knife stilling in his hand. "Humans," he repeated, his voice hard. The widow nodded, her eyes unblinking. "Yes," she said, "long before I met you, I heard the whispers, the warnings, the hopes." She shifted, her hands trembling, as she traced shapes in the ash by the fire. "Stories of your kind spread through the stars, carried in secret, in whispers, in fear. They say humans are strange, different, impossible to break." Her voice rose, fierce now. "They say where others fall, you rise. Where others kneel, you stand. Where others die, you endure." The human's eyes narrowed. He had heard rumors before, soldiers telling tales of humans fighting beyond reason, but never had he heard it spoken as prophecy. The widow leaned closer, her voice sharp as a blade. "They call you the unyielding flame, the spark that grows even in darkness." Her hands clenched, and some say, one day when the galaxy bows to fear, it will be a human who teaches them how to rise again. The word struck him like a hammer. He shook his head, his voice a growl. "Stories," he said. "Just stories." But the widow's eyes burned. "Bright, no," she whispered. "I saw it tonight." Her hand pointed toward the ruins where the raiders had fallen. "My people bent to them, but you did not. You fought with nothing but your will, your fire, and they feared you." She leaned forward, her voice trembling with conviction. "You are the prophecy, human." The human's chest tightened. He wanted to deny it, to push the words away. He was no savior, no chosen flame. He was only a man who had survived too many battles, but her words clung to him like chains, and somewhere deep inside, he wondered if she was right. The widow's eyes softened, her voice dropping low. "This is why I begged you, why I offered myself, why I placed my children at your feet. Not just because I need saving, but because I believe you are more than just a soldier." Her hand trembled as she pressed it against her heart. "You are human, and that means more than you know." The human stared into the fire, its glow dancing in his eyes. He wanted to reject it, to walk away, but something deep in his bones stirred a fire older than fear, older than defeat, the fire of being human. He rose suddenly, turning away, his voice rough. Prophecies don't stop bullets. And hope doesn't win battles. The widow looked at him, unshaken. No, she said, but humans do. Her words cut through him, sharper than his own. Blade. He clenched his fists, the weight of her belief pressing against him. The widow reached down, covering her children with her arms. They are my world, she whispered, and I give them to your fire. The night grew colder, the wind whispering across the ruins. The human stood in silence. Staring into the darkness where the raiders had fled, he knew they would return. And next time, they would come in force. But now he also knew something else. This fight was not only survival, it was something larger. Something tied to the old whispers, to the stories carried across the stars. He tightened his grip on his weapon, his face set like stone. The widow's secret was not just a plea, not just a prophecy. It was a weight, a burden, and a fire. And, whether he wanted it or not, it was his now. The human turned back to the widow. Her children, the ruins. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of steel. If they come again, he said, I will be ready. The widow lowered her head, her eyes shining with both fear and hope. She whispered only one word, yes, and. The ruins fell silent again, holding the secret between them, the prophecy of the human, the flame that would not break. The morning came slowly, the sun weak behind thick gray clouds. The ruins stretched in every direction, silent and broken. The widow sat with her children, feeding them the last crumbs of food she had hidden. The human stood apart, scanning the horizon, his eyes sharp, his jaw set. He knew the raiders would return, stronger, angrier. One man, even a human, could not hold against them forever. But he also knew something else, something the widow's words had planted in him. If others could be taught, if others could be led, then they could stand. And when people stood together, they became more than prey. He turned back to the widow. His voice low but firm. Are there others? He asked. Others who survived? The widow nodded slowly. Her eyes uncertain. Yes, she said. Scattered, hiding, afraid to move. Her voice lowered. They will not fight, not after what they've seen. The human's lips curved into something almost like a smile. They don't have to. Want to fight? He said. They only need to learn how. The widow's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across her face. You would teach them? She asked, her voice trembling. The human gave a slow nod. If they want to live, they will have to stand. He said, and if they want to stand, they will have to learn the human way by afternoon. The widow led him through the ruins. They moved carefully, following paths only she knew, and one by one. They found the survivors thin, broken, hollow-eyed. Some were women clutching starving children, some were old men leaning on sticks. A few were younger, but their eyes carried. No fire, only fear. They looked at the human with suspicion. With despair, another fighter, they muttered. It will not matter. But the human did not bend under their doubt. He stood tall, his voice sharp as steel. You think you are already dead, he said, but you are not. You breathe, you stand, you have blood in your veins. He pointed toward their children, their broken homes. Will you let the raiders take them too? Will you bow and call it survival? His words cut into them. Sharp, unyielding, they shifted uneasily, their eyes dropping. The widow watched. In silence, her heart pounding. No one had spoken to her people like this before, not with pity. Not with lies, but with fire. The human's voice grew harder. You fear the raiders because you think they are strong, he said. But I tell you this, they are not strong, they are only cruel. They win because you bend. They win because you let them. His hand clenched into a fist, his voice rising. but humans do not bend. Humans do not kneel, and if you learn from me, neither will you. Silence followed, heavy and long. Then one of the younger men stepped forward, his hands trembling. "If you teach us," he said, "will we live?" The human looked at him, eyes hard. "No," he said. "Some of you will die, but if you do nothing, all of you will die." The words shocked them, but they carried truth, and truth was heavier than comfort. One by one, the survivors nodded. Weak but willing, they had nothing left, and now this human offered them a choice. Not life, perhaps, but dignity. That night, the training began. The human gathered stones, broken wood, scraps of metal. He showed them how to shape weapons, how to move in silence, how to strike fast and vanish. He drilled them in simple lines, teaching them how to hold ground. They stumbled, they complained. They broke under the weight of their own weakness. But the human never raised his voice, never stopped. He corrected them, pushed them, forced them to stand again when they fell. Days passed, and slowly, something changed. The survivors' backs straightened, their eyes sharpened, their hands steadied. The widow watched as her people began to move, not like prey, but like hunters. Her children copied the drills, their small steps falling into rhythm, and in every motion. She saw the humans' fire spreading into them, at night, around. The fire, the survivors whispered. They spoke of him in hushed tones. The human fights different. They said, "He fears nothing. He makes us stand," another whispered. "He makes us believe." Hope grew, fragile but real, like a spark catching in dry wood. One evening, after a long day of training, the widow approached him. Her voice was soft but steady. "They listen to you," she said. "They believe you." The human's eyes narrowed, his face unreadable. "They believe because they must," he said. "Fear brought them here, but fire will keep them standing." She touched his arm lightly, her eyes shining in the firelight. "You are giving them more than fire," she whispered. "You are giving them back their spirit." The human looked at her, silent, inside. He felt the weight grow heavier, the weight of being more than just a man. He did not want it, but he could not turn from it, because he was human, and humans did not walk away from the weak. The next morning, as the survivors gathered with sharpened stones and rough spears, the human stood before them, his voice ringing. "Clear, the raiders are coming," he said, "and this time they will not find prey. This time they will find fighters." A murmur rose through the crowd, low but strong. And for the first time since their world had burned, the people of the ruins lifted their heads. Not in fear, but in defiance. The widow looked at him, her eyes wet with hope, her children clutched each other, smiling for the first time in many days. And in the broken world, among the ashes, something new began to rise. The human spirit. The sky was heavy with smoke. Engines roared in the distance, louder, closer. Shaking the ground beneath the ruins, the raiders were coming, and this time they did not come in small numbers. They came with ships, with fire, with rage, determined to finish what they had started. The human stood at the front of the survivors, his eyes sharp, his jaw set. Behind him, men and women clutched rough spears, sharpened stones, and makeshift blades. They were not soldiers, they were not trained warriors, but they were no longer prey. The widow held her children close, her face pale, but her eyes bright with defiance. The raider ships landed with a thunderous crash, metal beasts opening their jaws, spilling armored men into the ruins. Their leader stepped forward, tall and cruel, his voice carrying across the broken stone. "You think you can hide?" he snarled. "You think you can fight us?" His laughter echoed, cold and merciless. "We will break you, as we always do." The human stepped forward. Alone, his shadow long in the dust, His voice was calm, steady, carrying like iron. "No," he said, "not today." The raiders laughed, their weapons raised, their numbers vast. But the human did not falter. He raised his hand, and behind him, the survivors stood tall, their voices rose. A roar of defiance that shook the ruins. For the first time in years, they did not bow. They did not kneel. They stood. The raiders charged, their boots thundering against stone. The human moved. First, swift, precise, striking like lightning, he used every ruin, every shadow. Every trick he had taught the survivors, traps sprang from the rubble, falling stones. Hidden spikes, burning oil. The raiders stumbled, cursed, screamed, and in that moment the survivors struck. They fought with fear. Yes, but also with fire. Their hands trembled, but they did not break. They held the line as the human cut through the enemy, a storm of steel and fury. Where he moved, the raiders fell. Where he shouted, the survivors pushed harder. His fire spread into them, turning their fear into strength. The widow's children huddled in the corner of a broken wall, their eyes wide as they watched the impossible, ordinary people standing against monsters, all because a human had taught them how. The battle raged, dust and smoke filling the air. The raiders fought with rage, but rage is wild, unfocused. The survivors fought with purpose, with the discipline the human had drilled into them. Strike fast, vanish, strike again. They became ghosts among ruins. Blades in the dark, fire in the night. The raider leader roared, his weapon glowing as he pushed through the fight. He cut down survivors, his strength terrible, his presence like a storm. He towered above them, armored, unstoppable, until the human faced him. They circled each other in the ruins, the survivors pausing, the raiders watching. The leader sneered, his voice sharp. "You are nothing," he spat. "One man. One weak species, a dying flame." But the human's eyes burned, steady, unyielding. He raised his blade, his voice a whisper that carried like thunder. "Humans, do not break." The fight was brutal, blades clashing, sparks flying. The leader struck with strength, but the human struck with will. Every scar, every loss, every memory fueled him. He did not fight for glory. He did not fight for himself. He fought for the widow, for her children, for the survivors who had chosen to stand, and with one final strike, sharp and furious, he brought the leader down. The raider fell, his weapon clattering against stone. Silence followed, heavy, deep. Broken only by the ragged breath of the survivors, the remaining raiders froze, their leader fallen, their prey unbroken. And in that silence, they felt it fear, not of numbers, not of weapons, but of one man, one human. They fled, their engines roaring, their ships vanishing into the dark sky. The ruins shook with the sound of their retreat, and then, for the first time, there was quiet, real quiet. The survivors stood in shock, their weapons still in their hands. Then slowly, their voices rose. A cheer, a cry, a roar of victory. The widow clutched her children. Tears falling, she looked at the human, her voice trembling. "You did it," she whispered. "You made us fight. You made us win." The human shook his head, his voice low, steady. "No," he said. "You did it. You stood. You fought. You proved you were more than prey, but in her heart, and in the hearts of all who had stood." That day, they knew the truth. Without him, without his fire, without his spirit, they would have broken. It was the human who had turned ashes into flame. As the sun broke through the clouds, weak but warm, the survivors gathered their dead, tended their wounded, rebuilt their hope. The widow watched her children smile again, small but real, and she looked at the human, her voice soft but filled with certainty. "The galaxy will remember this," she whispered. They will remember that one human stood, and because of him, so did we. The human said nothing, only stared into the horizon, but inside he felt the truth settle deep. The galaxy was vast, cruel, merciless, but wherever humans stood, there would always be hope, because humans did not kneel. Humans did not break. Humans endured, and in the ashes of a broken world, the legend of humanity's fire began to spread.